see what we can do to make this work. I am going to be completely transparent with y'all. I do not know how this is going to go, so I appreciate any amount of patience that you can show me in these trying times as we attempt to figure out how best to make all this work. Right now, my current projects are, I have a Legion of the Damned Honor Guard, and I have an Ulrich the Slayer reimagined as a Primaris. I also have 2 of my 4 female assassins left to finish. So those are the options I have right now for what I'm going to work on. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the assassins as they're almost done. So I feel like they're in a pretty good place. So from where I'm at currently with them, they really only need a little bit more, and then they will be all set. So like any painting anything, first and most important thing to do is make sure that your paints are reasonably thinned. You don't want to be trying to do this and your paints be super gloopy and thick. It's always kind of hard to explain in a video exactly what I mean when I say that, but since we're sitting here together working on it, I'm going to go ahead and see what I can do to show you what I mean. So when I go to paint this and I'm moving the paint around, it should have the consistency of about 2% milk. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, in practice, what that means is that if I were to take it and I were to smear it, it should have about the same consistency if I were to do that with milk. It's a really bizarre and often used expression to express to new people for how to do this, but that really is the best way to look at it. So that is kind of what we all default to. And what we're going to do now is I'm just looking to pick out these little bits of metal armor. We'll go through and hit them with a shade when we're done, and that should bring them right in line with the other 2 assassins, and then I'll have all 4 of them done. And that'll be nice because I'll have completed one of my to-do lists. That's always it's always good to try to get something off of that list. These guys are by Raging Heroes, and they are very clearly proxies. So if 3D proxies are not your thing, this probably isn't going to be your thing either, but keep an open mind because there are a lot of very interesting makers that have made some very interesting things. Now, whether or not anybody will see this or whether or not we'll even keep doing this is still very much up in the air. This is almost as much a test just for me to see how to do it as it is to see if it actually works. I've been putting together videos for a minute now, and I've been doing a lot of shorts just trying to show you guys some of the stuff that we've painted over the years here. And just to make sure that we've got content going for that eternal algorithm that is the YouTubes. I didn't realize I might actually be... I'll move this down just a little bit. It's a little easier for you guys to see. It is as difficult as you would think it is to paint and record at the same time and be able to see what you're doing. So if you're ever going to do any of these kind of things at home, I recommend highly that you just bring it up to your face and don't try to record it because it makes it unnecessarily challenging for sure. But we're going to make it. We're going to make it through. So there we go. All right, it looks like she's got some on her shin too. Thankfully, the assassins, both these and the GW ones, are largely bodysuits because they're, superhuman assassins. They're wearing essentially Power Ranger outfits. Makes this a smidge easier. All right. I'll come over here and we'll get this side. All right, and then that's most of her leg armor. Now, bear with me as I'm attempting to make all of this work. It says that we might actually have somebody here, which would be really cool. If you're here, say something. We'd love to talk to you as soon as I figure out how to make that work. Here with my very first old man attempt at Streamlabs. I believe we're live on YouTube, but I'll be honest with you, at this point I'm not even sure. So we're just kind of hoping and praying at this point. So I'll tell you what, after I finish this, I'm going to open this up again on a different device on YouTube and see if we actually are going live or if I'm just talking to myself, which is fine. I talk to myself a lot as it is anyway. There's an old cartoon I saw when I was younger. The Transformers Beast Wars had one of my favorite quotes from a villain ever. Megatron is talking to himself, and he habitually talks to himself. He frequently answers his own question as he asks it, and one of his lieutenants, one of the mouthier lieutenants, finally challenges him, and it's like, why do you always talk to yourself? And without missing a beat, cold as ice, my guy goes, I need intelligent conversation. And just keeps walking like he didn't just drop the absolute bomb. I remember being a kid and thinking, that is the coldest shit I have ever seen. I probably didn't think those exact words because I was fairly young at the time, but I do very much remember it. So I still quote that even today. If I catch myself talking to myself and somebody mentions anything about it, I'm like, yeah, I'm really desperate for intelligent conversation, and it usually shuts them down pretty quick. They're like, oh, well, that wasn't. Well, shit. And, sometimes you just gotta shut them down. All right, so I am going to pause for just a sec so I can walk over, I can rotate over here and figure out if I can get this pulled up on a different screen so I can see what, if anything, is happening in the chat. Try to get used to having you guys here for some stuff. It looks like, if I'm understanding Streamlabs correctly, if I do this often enough, they'll let me multi-stream without having to pay them, which would be fantastic because, well, I'm broke and I don't want to pay them. So, that would be great as an option. So bear with me for just a second. Don't go nowhere. We're still here. We're still live. We're still doing this. We just bear with me for a minute while I get this as straightened out as I possibly can. Again, old man, you gotta really bear with me with this stuff. I'm doing my best here. All right. So it looks like the stream's up. So we're going to silence that so you don't have to listen to me in the background. All right, cool. So we definitely have some messages going there. Hi, everybody. All right, cool. There we go. That'll work. This has got to be the least efficient use of my bandwidth ever, but you know what? It's going to be all right. I'm going to make it work. I now literally have this up on two different places in my little studio here so that I can see if anybody shows up, and then I can also respond to it. It's when you're broke, you really got to make it work. You just do what you got to do to make it work. All right, so here we go. We're ready to go now. The Your New Dad is the alt account that I run to help people who need to hear things from a dad that they maybe didn't hear in their life. So don't mind him. He is me. Me is him. Pulling the curtain of the corporation back here, exposing Dorkness Inc.'s deepest, darkest secrets. But, it's all for the love of the fam, We just gotta, I gotta be honest with y'all. I really, you guys, the future Dorkness Inc. interns I'm relying on y'all. So I want y'all to know that you can trust me. We're going to be honest with you. We're going to be straight up with you. Anywho, so if you ever come to one of these streams and you want some dad advice, maybe I'll blend the two together. So funny enough, that actually, by and large, is these two done. There's not really much more I want to do to them. What works about them and what really makes them work is the fact that they are so simple. They're so simple. Oh, it is great. It's funny because the Games Workshop ones they're obnoxiously complicated. Like, for whatever reason. All right, so I just straight lost it there. That was fun. Good to know. All right, so I cannot do that. Good to know. Do not leave the thing because it will absolutely crash out on me. It's less than good. I probably should be able to see that, and I can't. Hello. Nothing? It says that I'm there. Switch between scenes. It was created. Now I'm not sure I'm still live anymore, so let's see. Now I'm not sure I'm still live anymore. There we go. Okay. So that's good to know. Don't do that. In the future, I won't do that. Good to know. All right. So we're back, and we will continue onward and upward. So this is the 4. This is the 4 in total. These got a different kind of color and a little bit of visual to them. So we need kind of to bring them together visually so that all they have some kind of common ground. We could do that with their bases. Now, normally base work is probably my least favorite work. I've never really liked base stuff. It's a pain in the ass. It takes a lot of work. And frankly, you don't get much out of it, if I'm being honest. But given the situation and because they are little characters, we're going to go ahead and tough it out and see what we can do. So let's get us some supplies. Just dropping shit left and right. Alright, so what we'll do then is we're going to do kind of an industrial scene here. We're going to definitely want to put together some modern rubble, if you will. This is absolutely the kind of guys that you're going to see out doing things in like facilities somewhere, all secretive and assassiny. So we want some stuff to kind of represent that. First thing we're going to do is take some of this. This is Army Painter barbed wire, and we're going to curl it around a paintbrush handle, and that's going to give us that classic curved barbed wire look. Ooh, lost my paintbrush. All right, so and just like real barbed wire, it's all kind of stuck. So there you go, and then there you go, some of the barbed wire. Good stuff. All right, and then we're going to do a few more of these. This thing is an absolute tangled mess, and if I knew of a better product that was easier to work with, I probably would switch over, but I don't, so I'm just going to deal with it and complain. All right, so, oh my God, what is going, there we go, there's an edge. All I need is an edge, there we go. That work. All right, so when it comes to this hobby, it really is a matter of pacing yourself and finding stuff that you want to do. You'll frequently find that sometimes you just kind of get burned out from one thing or another, and the hobby stops being a meditative retreat for you and starts being work. And I mean, if you're doing it as work, that's one thing. But if you're not, it should always be an escape from whatever problems it is that you're dealing with in your life. And if it's not, then you probably should consider giving it a break and maybe coming back to it at another time. You know, it really, it's not worth getting stressed out about, is I guess my point here. My point is it's not worth getting stressed out about. So if you find yourself stressed out about it, you probably should take a break. Now, one of the things I've always been kind of curious about is whether or not I should do commentary on the current edition of Warhammer. And because Warhammer is such an involved hobby, and because Games Workshop is never going to want to work with me, and I've made peace with that, I don't know. It seems counterintuitive to be pushing their product and trying to help them when they became a major corporation, sold out, and then immediately started, business practices that have, in my opinion, and only my opinion, allowed them to be less than stellar to their community base. But, the actual artists that aren't the corporation still do fantastic work. So, there's that. There's always kind of a back and forth balance you got to figure out for stuff like that and where you stand. Sometimes your principles tell you that it's too important, you don't want to do it, and you're not going to make an exception, and that's fine. Everyone's welcome to have that opinion if that's the opinion that you have. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical problem. Bear with us. Honestly, if we only have a little bit of a technical problem, I'll consider this a roaring success. Because as it stands right now, I can't actually see the chat at all, and I'm using an alt account and a whole second ass tablet to try and see what's going on in the chats. And I don't think that's how professionals do it. I somehow don't think that Queso is running a tablet and a phone, but then again, Queso is also not painting Warhammer, so I guess you take the good, you take the bad. So, all right, so we got some Eshin Gray here, and we're going to use the same colors and the same rubble on all of these. And what that should do is that should give us a sense of unity between the units so that the whole unit has kind of a cohesion to it. So let's start with the Eshin Gray, and we're just going to put it right in the pot. When it comes to Games Workshop pots, because these are not the best designs for regular paint, they're great for shades and washes and They were great for those. They actually are my favorite design for those. The bottle droppers can be really frustrating for those, but for regular layer paint, this stuff is awful. This is an awful design. It gets so much air on it, and it starts to dry the paint out so poorly. I don't know. It's amazing to me that they will not concede and switch over to bottle droppers for everything else. But they corner the market, and they make sure that everybody who uses their stuff is easily identifiable as their stuff. And it's kind of been their business model for as long as I've been paying attention to Games Workshop, which has been a hot minute now, to be honest. Something happens to your company when you become a publicly traded company and start making billions of dollars. But you know what? I didn't make billions of dollars, so what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet. I'm sorry. I'm going to try not to have this be a very curse-heavy channel if I can. I do kind of have a sailor mouth, so I'm not guaranteeing that by any stretch of the imagination, but I will try and knock my own stuff all over. All right, so that's that one. I'm just going to repeat this for each of them. Everybody gets some base stuff. So right now in the background, today specifically, I was working on the Wonder Woman video. So if you follow the TikTok, actually, which is funny because I'm not a TikTok person, but if you follow the TikTok, when I make those videos where we have the stuff that spins, I always end up putting them on TikTok first because they have an editor that I can use in my phone, and that is the only reason. So I will put it on TikTok, and then I will get the editor up and running, and I will switch over and put it onto the YouTube as an upcoming short because YouTube wants me to have stuff every day. And I desperately need some stuff to work here, so we're gonna do our best to follow that. But if you follow me over on TikTok, you'll see stuff much, much earlier. And you can see stuff that hasn't been released yet to the YouTubes. And one of the things I released was the spin video for the Wonder Woman model. Now, the Wonder Woman model just got completed a few days ago. So it is brand new. And I cannot wait to show you guys the video of it. It was such a fun project to work on. But it took so much for it to come together. And it uses washing techniques, a lot of washing and shading techniques, but it also uses a lot of very thin layers to make the skin tone work. And because of the way that the layers have to sit on top of the skin tone to really work, it creates a really interesting project where you cannot stop halfway, because if you stop at any point between the phase 2 and the end of it, you will look at your model and be like, what in the hell have I done? This is awful. But, it's a trust the process. You got to trust the process. Like, just keep going, keep doing it. It's going to work. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I had a moment while I was doing it where I was like, oh, man, I wonder if I've made a mistake here. It's like, no, that's normal. That's part of the process. But, when you've worked on a model and you've gotten a bunch of stuff done already and you're happy with it, and then you make all of the skin bright magenta pink, for just a second, you're like, oh, I made a mistake. This was a poor idea. But it's not. Just have faith. It'll be all right. You're going to get there. Now, one of the things you might be noticing as I'm doing this is some of the paint is pulling from the edges. And the reason it's doing that is because these bases aren't primed. Now, if I were going to be doing a lot of gaming with these models, if I was going to take them out and actually game with them, I probably would prime this just to be safe. But the weather out here is terrible right now, and I can't really use a rattle can primer because the weather just doesn't allow it right now. And I didn't feel like painting the base with the paint on primer and then having to do it again. So instead, this was my alternative. All right, I'm going to mute this real quick because I need to cough. All right. So with that all done, there's really nothing else we can do with this until it's fully dried. So we're going to put those on the back burner. And let's pull out, I'll tell you what, I'm a little more excited to work on this. So let's pull out the Legion of the Damned Blade Guard. Let's see, I'm going to get him up on a thing here so I can move him a little better. Let's see where we're at. Where did I leave off? All right, so I can see I've got some of my Eshin highlights in there. My first layer highlights for the black. Let's see, we got the red put in there. So where do I want to start? So we definitely need some more highlights, and we need some more highlights, and we need a glaze over this fire. So let's start with, Lord, where do I want to start? Let's start with the silver. I've already got some silver out. Let's start with the silver. So what we're going to do now is, make sure everybody can see, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just give a first coat of silver just to get the color on there to the places that are going to be silver. Now, if you're wondering where I got these amazing bits for this Legion of the Damned, I actually got them from Atlan Forge. Now, Atlan Forge has given me permission to mention them by name. If it's a larger 3D production company or the company has given me permission, I will mention them by name whenever I can. If you ever find a bit here and I've either not mentioned it, that's usually why. But if you find a bit here and I don't seem to know who it's by, and I'll try to tell you if I don't know who it's by, and you do, please feel free to let me know. And then don't post it. Maybe reach out to me on one of the Facebook or whatever. Don't post it on the video itself, just in case that creator doesn't want it being known. But just that way, if they do, I can see if I can reach out to them. Some creators are pretty good about getting back to me, and some creators don't, because, I mean, really, and I don't blame them for this, just to be clear, I do not blame anyone for this, because I'm not anybody important in this community yet, so, you know, if they get a message from some random Dorkness Inc., and they're like, well, that's suspicious as hell, and in 2025, if you don't want to answer something that looks like it comes from the government, you know, like, I cannot blame you. But, you know, I don't want to put undue attention on people who don't want it. And that is really the concern. And that seems to be the problem. And I don't want to, you know, a lot of these makers are trying to make stuff work. And, you know, they've got a lot of stuff working against them. So I don't want to make that worse just because, you know, I want to give them credit. So, you know, we're going to do our best. We're going to mind our P's and Q's. We're going to try and keep James from harassing the independent artists who are out here making our hobby better. You know, and hopefully, maybe, we'll get lucky and a couple of the artists will, you know, be able to feed their families with their craft. And that's the dream we all have, I think. Everybody who's in this hobby long haul and everybody who wants to do something in this hobby, we all just want to feed our families with our art, because, you know, what could be better, right? What could be better than feeding your family with your art? So I've got Pro Acrylic Black Brown. Now, Pro Acrylic, I've only just recently started using some of their stuff. I will tell you, these guys are fantastic. These paints have really, I've had a couple I've been a little disappointed with, but it is not the norm. Like, most of their products have just been absolutely stellar, and I'm very grateful that I found them. And I actually found them because I was on the hunt for a green for my salamanders. And if you've ever tried to get that, I'm going to call it striking scorpion green, although I don't think that's a fair description of it. But if you've ever tried to get that, like, bright, vibrant green, it is really difficult to do with paints that, like, GW has, for example. And so what was happening is I was trying to get them bright silver, and then I would give them the Carndross green contrast paint, which, if you've ever had to do it like that before, is a really, really obnoxious way to have to paint something. It's a really obnoxious way to have to paint something, and I don't recommend it at all for anyone. And so it spurred me on to go look up a bunch of different kinds of greens. And I had a bunch of greens I had come in that I was trying to find. But it wasn't until I found this one, just called green, that I was like, you know what? That's it. This is the best. This is exactly what I needed. And it was. I'll tell you what. Just in case I do make a video out of this, hold tight. I'll show you what I need. I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of my salamander characters readily available. So this is Salamander Assault Intercessor. I'd say he's most of the way done. I probably don't have anything else I want to do with him. I'm real happy with him. And then I also have a Salamander Captain in Terminator armor. Woo. Real happy with how he came out too. And that bright green is just, it's so hard to find a good green that can do that. And you know, Pro Acrylic really knocked it out of the park with this. So if you're out there and you're trying to find a salamander green, I cannot recommend that one enough. I really can't. You know, it's a good green to have. All right, so let's see. So back to the lab here, if you will. Let's see where we're at. So we got our brown drying, we got our silver drying. actually don't know that I'm going to do anything with the Aquila. So once he puts the shield up, you're not really going to be able to see it anyway. He's going to be like this, and I'll be like, eh. Yeah, because the Aquila is kind of going to take away from the shield if I do too much with it. So what we're going to do is probably just going to highlight that gray and call it a day. And we'll let the shield take some of the spotlight there. But what I do want to do is get my brighter highlights in there to help this black armor stand out. Now, if you've ever worked with a painter for any amount of time in this hobby, one of the things you're likely to have run into if you're talking to them is the best black is not black, because black is a hue that you can't do anything with. You can't really darken it from black, because black is, the end. So we want to try and avoid black whenever you can. Black is not your friend, not in painting. Now, it's great if you need to mix, or if you need to tone, or you need to shift paint. Black is great for those applications. But as far as like black color goes, it really is not. It is not where it's at. It really isn't. I should have done this on a wet palette. Oh well. Maybe I'll switch over when we're done. All right, so I don't know if that's coming through. But what we have here is we have a roughly 50-50 mixture of that. This is Filthy Soup, but it's just a light gray. And Eschen Gray, which there aren't many good alternatives to Eschen Gray specifically. Eschen Gray is fantastic. It's one of the few paints that I will 100% buy from Games Workshop, because there just isn't another paint that can do what Eschen Gray can do. The only other paint I have that kind of relationship with is German Gray, which is the best black I have ever used, and I will die on that hill for as long as it takes. But so what we're going to do is we're just going to pick out a couple of really high points. Because I just want it to be obvious that his hand's up here. Don't really want to bring a whole lot other of attention to that. And we're going to come back here. Now, knowing that the shield is going to be here changes where it's worth putting your highlights in. Because like the shield is going to block most of this. So there's really no point to doing a lot of highlighting work on this leg from the front, because you're never going to see it. So what we'll do instead is we're going to put a couple of nice sharp edgy highlights just around where we can see. That was definitely too thick. The thickness of that highlight was too much. Now, from the side view, you will see this. And this little curve is one of my favorite aesthetically things about the Mark 10 armors. I can't even explain really why. It just is. There's just something about it that really satisfies that ADHD and inner itch of mine. Let's see. All right. Here. Now, because as you see, I got some silver in there, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide it with a highlight. I'm going to call that a day. All right. Now, this is kind of a Games Workshop thing. It's not a particularly realistic thing, but you know what? I've grown to love it as somebody who has been around Games Workshop for a long, long time. This highlight is so silly and doesn't make any sense because it's a rounded surface. So the highlight that makes sense is to do a circular highlight like right there, but that's just not the Space Marine look, man. So nobody does it that way. Me included. That's, just a hypocrite. But I'm just going to use some edge, let it get a little rough in there. I'm not super concerned about backpacks. I actually find backpacks to be one of my least favorite things, and I will frequently just ignore a backpack if I can get away with it. Because they're just... I get it from it makes sense that they have it perspective, but design-wise, they're so ugly. And they're so bulky, and they do nothing. Like, they don't help the frame, they don't help the visuals, they just... That's all I can say. I'm going to say, Yeah, I can't imagine why Games Workshop isn't going to want to reach out and work with Dorkness Inc. here, Sitting here shitting on their designs for 5 minutes. But you know what? To their credit, a lot of their designs, fantastic. And man, when Games Workshop is on it and they're doing shit, man, they are the best. As long as you can keep the politics out of them. which is becoming more and more of an issue as we move forward because there's money to be made. And as long as there's money to be made, morality is not going to be a factor. Sorry to say, they are a business and they need to make money. But just never forget, my interns, the first rule of business: they don't give a shit about their customers. They don't. They really don't. The only time they give a shit about their customers is when it affects their bottom line. And if anybody tells you differently, they're lying to you. Or they're ignorant. They're either ignorant or they're lying to you. But I'm a cynic, admittedly, so I guess you can take that with a grain of salt if you feel like you have to. Oh yeah, that's way better. All right. Let's see what we got here. All right, so what we're going to do then, so let's do a little bit of some freehanding on this shield of paper here. I have a lot of room to work with, and I don't have a lot down there yet. So when you're doing free script on a model in this scale, it is not reasonable to even attempt to actually write something legible. Don't even try. It's absolutely not worth it. If you practiced for more than I'm willing to, you might be able to get there, but I promise it would not be worth it in the end. But what you can do is make a couple of things that are identifiable by the naked eye. So we're going to do, let's see, I got a line there, and take the line all the way down, have it come out, have it come out, have it come down, have it come out. Kind of looks like an R. And we're going to do, how about I was hoping for a U. That's a little more of a V there. We'll take it. And then we're going to do kind of an X here. All right, so we got kind of an R, kind of a V, and kind of an X. Now, why am I doing that? Because the rest of the script that we're going to do on this, we're going to do in black. And what it should do, if I do it correctly, is really make that red pop like it has something important written in the beginning of it in red, and the rest of the text is just in normal black. Easy peasy. Now, one of the things that's fun to know about models is your eye wants to see what makes sense to it. So when you're looking at this, your eye wants you to see the text. They want you to see it. So all you got to do is help the eye get there. So we're going to do dot, 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 space, dot, 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 space, squiggly, 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 dot, dot, dot. I'm going to go down. We're going to do dot, 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 dot. Dot, squiggly, and squiggly. Okay. Now, your biggest problems here are making sure that you have the right amount of paint and that the paint you have is the right amount of consistency. Because if it's too much, you will ruin this so fast, it'll absolutely make your head spin. One of the things that these contrast paints are actually really good at is being just the right amount of liquidy to be able to do this. But you got to be careful, because if you have too much on your brush, it'll come off and it'll ruin all your hard work, and there's really no way to fix it except starting over. Nobody wants to do that. That is the worst. So just take your time, refill it when you need it. One of the downsides to using thin brushes like this is that they don't actually hold much paint. So you got to kind of refill them, if you will. It's usually not a big deal. It's just something you got to keep in mind. As you see, the contrast paint's already drying on my thumbnail there. So it is not lasting very long. And what we're going to do is just going to kind of go across. I got all that. Now we're going to do the same thing for the purity seals. Now, a lot of the times I won't bother with purity seals. They're entirely too much work for entirely too little payoff. But since I did those, and I've already got it out, it's worth doing if I've got time. And because he is the Legion of the Damned, he gets a little extra attention for this kind of stuff, because it's very Legion of the Damned-y. You know, you want that aesthetic. You want that, like, crazy undead warrior with the powers of hell. So this is like the one time that I would encourage you to do all the purity seals. Yes, all of them. And yes, I am aware. I know it's a pain in the ass, and I don't particularly like doing it either. But like I said, you make exceptions for special cases, and this is a special case. I can't imagine a scenario where I'm going to have many of these guys floating around for any reason, so I won't have to do many more of these if I ever have to do this again. I probably will eventually want another few blade guard just in case, just because the unit looks good as a unit. And there you go. Now you've got all sorts of scribbly script all over your stuff. It looks good. It feels good. It's a good day. All right, so they're still drying, so we still have some time to kill to get ready of this other stuff. I guess we could go to gold now. Gold seems like a good color to go to next. Let us do some gold, my friends. Let us do some gold. So give it a good shake. Now, anytime you've got a paint, especially a Games Workshop paint, go get some stainless steel mixing balls. This is what they look like. Get them on Amazon. They're not very expensive. Get them and put them in your paint. They will agitate the paint and they will let the paint mix better. It'll increase your shelf life of these paints because they'll mix better and they won't get all nasty at the bottom. It'll make them easier to deal with and smoother, which you're going to need because Games Workshop paints tend to dry out a little more because, as you see, it's getting exposed to an awful lot of air right now. Now, you could, and it is advisable, to just pull the paint that you need out onto a palette. That is kind of the Games Workshop answer to the problem that they created. But I'll be honest with you, most of the time, I don't bother because it's more effort than it's worth, frankly. What I will do is I will put little bits of water and little bits of paint medium into my paint just to help get it some hydration back so it's not quite running so dry. That seems to work pretty well. I've been pretty happy with those results. Although, again, I've got bottle paints that are still kicking and have been kicking for a very long time now. And I've known people who have the old Games Workshop paints, like the old ones that came in those goofy red topped bottles. And man, it can be 10 years later and those things are still usable. It is crazy. But, they went through a period where they wanted to really get a paint that was their own, and they put a lot of money into it. And they renamed everything so that they could own the trademarks to everything, and then they did it again. And it's just like, okay, I hear you, ultramarine blue boy. And it turns out, you can't really own that name. So instead, they just changed it again. They're like, well, if we can't own that name, we'll own another name similar. I don't know. It all seems silly to me, I guess. All right, another good point of notice here is make sure that whatever paintbrush you're using is the right size for what you're doing. So if I were to continue to use that itty bitty brush on this, it would probably make me crazy because it would take forever and it would do fine, but it would be so painstakingly long to do. And instead I can just kind of move to this paintbrush, which is still a pretty small paintbrush, really. But it's much better suited to this. I'm just going to kind of do this outside line. Now, one of the big myths I find when it comes specifically to painting is that everything has to be done to this really, really high standard or nothing looks good. And it really isn't true. You can cut a lot of corners and still have an amazing product, which causes people to visibly gasp when they see it. And, you just got to know which corners you can cut and which corners you can't. So as you get along in the hobby, what you will hopefully find is that there are corners that you can cut because they're not worth the effort, but ways to make sure that when you cut them, you don't lose your quality. And that's the secret to really getting better at painting. Because the reality is that most of us aren't going to spend 100 hours on a paint project. Honestly, even if I wanted to, I would be challenged to do that. Unless I was doing a great big thing, and I don't particularly want to do anything that would take me hundreds of hours, if I'm being honest. So what I find is a better, more practical advice is figure out what corners you can cut and still get a good product. Figure out what parts you like doing. Different people enjoy different parts of the painting process. And then, let yourself focus on those. Because, if you're doing something you don't like, you're not going to like it. I know how that sounds, but, hear me out. And, you're going to make your own painting hobby and painting journey much more difficult and much less fun. And, no matter whether you're 3D printing these things or you're buying them from sketchy sites or you're buying them from a local friendly game store, the point is that you put your money and your effort into getting them. You should be enjoying the process. And if you're somebody who's in it only for the game itself, then, this part of the process just doesn't appeal to you. In your case, unless you're, trying not to lose points at a competition for not having your shit painted well, you're the only type of person I would say I wouldn't advise taking my advice. But anybody else, I would say that, it's solid advice. Oh, hey, check that out. We have Dank Twank. Wow, that's a name. I am on YouTube's live for maybe an hour and I'm going to get demonetized because Dank Twank showed up. You know what, though? If I got to get demonetized with somebody, I'm glad it's you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we are in the midst of prepping up some bases and finishing up on this Legion of the Damned Blade Guard. And a little bit of me rambling. So what I've got here is the barbed wire from the Army Painter set. And we've curled them so that they will fit nicely, and if this would finish drying sometime, we'll go ahead and finish these bases up with them, and I'll show you how to get them all looking unified. What's that? I saw hair there. If you've got animals, you will find that you will find animal hair everywhere. It is absolutely maddening. In just a second, let me grab a drink. But thank you all for coming out and being here for our inaugural painting session here as we try to help an old man work through how to make YouTube stuff work. I hope that your day is going well. Make sure you drop into the chat whatever it is that you're working on or anything that you have any questions about, any kind of technique you'd want to go over that I might be able to assist you with. I got a pretty versatile pack as I've been doing this for 20 some years, so just about anything that you might want to know, I got a pretty good handle on that should be able to help you in some kind of fashion with. Now, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the blue fire here, since I'm still waiting for them to dry. And what I did is I took a light blue, a dark blue, and white to make the flames. Now, white is the hottest color that fire can be. So I want the very bottom of these to still have some of that white in them. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some shade on, but we're going to kind of focus the shade towards the top, and we're going to try to leave some of that white untainted, if you will, towards the bottom. So we're going to focus on up here. We're going to focus on up here. I'm going to leave some of that where the flame just connects to the sculpt. We want to try and leave some of that to be that white color. Now, one of the things that's nice about this Tyran Blue is it actually isn't great as a shade, but it's really good as a glaze because it's good at tinting colors more so than shading them. And this is one of those applications where that actually benefits us a lot. So we're going to go ahead and just use this, and I don't have to get the glaze out. All right, I'm just going to do the tops of all the flames. Now, of course, we're going to lose some of that sheen as that dries, but that should give us right about where I want to be. Take that down just a smidge. And do some of his eye there. It's super hard to see his eye. And as it's drying, you can just kind of poke it and pull some of the excess off so you don't have too much. Nice and easy peasy. There we go. Good deal. All right, my friends and family, let's see. All right, so it looks like we're finally ready to wrap these four up so I can get on with their lives. So we've got 4 pieces of barb. We've got a bunch of pieces of rubble. And we're going to get a little bit of glue. So primarily when you're dealing with bases, there's two types of glues you'll use. You'll use the good old-fashioned Elmer's multi-purpose glue or PVA glue, and you'll use good old-fashioned super glue. Now, which one you're going to use depends on what type of thing you're doing. Now, I need these little rocks to stay pretty firmly in place. So what I prefer to do for them is a touch of super glue where I want it to go. Now, what I will do is as I'm looking at these models, I'm putting together in my mind where there's open space that I could break up with a little bit of texture. And that's generally speaking going to be how you're going to want to pick what pieces of rubble and whatnot go where. You just kind of want to break up some of these patches just to make the whole thing a little more visually interesting. Now, there's the general rule of thumb I find is that the brighter and more vibrant the color on your model is, the darker and more mundane your base should be. And the darker and more mundane your model is, the brighter your base should be. Now, despite the fact that these are all relatively dark colors, the actual color in them is still at a pretty high value. So I don't want to take away from that too much. So I probably won't do a lot of very bright with this. What I probably will do is once I get these guys rubbled down and it gets all the way dry, which is going to be the big one, I'll go through and paint them to match the gray color and then go back in and brighten them up a little bit after they're fully dry. Let's do year next. Now, looking at the way that this base was sculpted, I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but if you look at the way this base is sculpted, it actually already has some texture in it where it almost looks like a city block, like texture you might see in stonework in a city. So for this one, I don't want as much because this is going to make up some of that texture. I think that's probably enough. One to probably do. Now, because I know I'm going to go in and paint this again, I'm actually going to hold off doing the barbed wire until they're all the way dry. Now, this one's got this nice piece of root or broken stem here, so we're only going to do a little bit with this one too. Just give it a little bit of verticality. My goodness. Don't mind me, I'm just having a stroke. All right, and see, we've got a little bit of that texture again where this one looks like it's on the outside of a city or, in some rubble. So let's do a little bit here too. All right, so we got a little spot of glue there. Get one of our rubble pieces, try to get the bits of whatever that is off. All right, cool, so we got that in there. Now, what you can do, because I don't want to sit and wait for the super glue to dry, is you can use an accelerant, Instaset. And what this will do is exactly as it's described, it will cause the super glue to instantly cure and set. Now, it does mean that the super glue is actually a little bit weaker than it would be if it had been able to dry normally. It does make it so that the super glue isn't as powerful of a bond as it would be if we had done it the other way. But it also means it's done now. And this super glue is fully dried. You can actually see some of it as the curing accelerator dries. And if you're in a hurry or you're trying to get a sequence of things done, it can be a real lifesaver. So what we can do now is we've got 4 barbed wires. I don't really want to do that. Anything else I want to do before we get to that? I guess not. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Oops, I lost a little bit of my backlight there. I'm going to take just a touch of paste. Now, I don't recommend that anyone buy texture paste. You should absolutely just get some sand, some medium, and some paint, and just do it that way. But it was too late. I had already bought this in my efforts to try it out, so I have it, so I'm going to use it. And what I'm looking to do here is these like hunks here, I want them to blend in a little bit. So that's where this is going to come in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my silicone tool here so it doesn't get stuck to it. And I'm just going to kind of create some some flush rubble with it. That way it makes more sense as to why it's there. Alright, I'll take this. I'm just going to kind of do the same thing. Just a little bit here and there. And once this dries, it'll have, as you might have guessed, a thin sandpaper texture to it. And we're going to use that to kind of build up our rubble here. And the bigger our piece of rubble, the more this paste it's going to get. Now, you can do some of the effects paints that Games Workshop has, and they've got some pretty neat ones when they work. But they're a super big pain in the ass to make work properly, and I don't know that I'd recommend them for anyone, frankly, so take that with a grain of salt. They're difficult to work with and they're testy, but they do, once you get them right, they do make a pretty cool product at the end. They're testy and they're kind of a pain in the ass. So what I'll do is I will probably go ahead and either let that dry overnight, or I will get the hairdryer out and I'll run it to help all that dry. The texture paste, unfortunately, takes a lot of dry even with the hairdryer. It just is the nature, so you can only speed that up so much. I had hoped that we would be able to do a little more with the bases tonight, but the reality is that, much like cooking, it doesn't make any sense to rush it, and you'll end up with a subpar product if you rush. So just go to your next thing. Don't worry about it. It'll be all right. Let's take a look here. How we're doing. As you can see here, it's still very wet there, which means it's still drying out, so I don't want to mess with that. Looks like we got some silver flecks in that. I don't like that. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some snake bite leather. If you were going to pick just a handful of contrast colors to keep, I would take Apothecary White and I would take Snake Bite Leather. They'd probably be my first two, because there's just not many things that can do what those two paints can do. So I'll take this and we're going to use it on our brown. It's going to give us some depth and some richness to this brown that it doesn't have currently. And because it is contrast paint, it's instinctively going to try to pool. And what's going to happen is it's going to be thinner around these edges and darker in the middle, and that's exactly what we want, because that's going to give us kind of a more realistic look. So it's going to do that for us, and we're not going to have to do anything to make it do that, and that's a win. Anytime we can make our lives a little easier. I'm going to do the same thing with these pouches. So I had painted them bone when I was doing all the bones, and then given them a black wash as I was black washing other stuff. So what that means now is that when this contrast paint dries, as long as it does what it's supposed to do the way it's supposed to, what we should see is a beautiful, rich, leathery color, and it should have all the highlights already baked into it, because it's the edges that were bleached bone will be lighter, and the middle that's going to get the bulk of the snake bite leather will be darker. And that should help bring all that together. Yep. Oh, I missed a whole ass thing there. And sometimes as you spin a model, you realize you completely overlook something. So, that happens too. Put some red out. Throw a little bit of red on that purity seal real quick. Bada bump. Good deal. Let's see anything else. Close that shut. Now, when it comes to things like the back of this, I wouldn't worry about any splash over from there, because you're not going to see it. This is what you're going to see. As long as this looks good visually and remember, you're going to be looking at this from a couple feet away, don't even sweat the other stuff, because the other stuff really doesn't matter. Let's dry fit this real quick and see how we're doing. I actually think he had it and it broke off. Yeah, that's what happened. Ain't that a shame? So this is where we're at currently with him. Oh, doesn't that look wonderful? Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now, because he is Legion of the Damned, he's kind of plain in his feet, because there's not a lot to offer to do with him with the blade guard middle. So what we're going to do is we might actually just paint some flames on his shin. But we might not. I have to think on that.
Honey?
So that's definitely a thing we could do. Yes, hon?
Is he down here with you?
He is not.
talk to you about going anywhere?
He did not. All right, so with that, it looks like I'm going to be hopping off of here. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your night.